For those who have wondered, I'm still alive and well. It has been a very long time since I have last recorded a video for this channel. Let me tell you something, being a detransitioner is a very, very interesting path to take. It is an absolute annihilation of your entire identity. Everything you thought you were, everything just falls apart. And it's raining a little bit out right now, and I was trying to go for a little walk and talk while I make this video, but it's raining, so I'm standing under some trees for a little bit to try to be shielded from the rain. So, I'm not even sure where to begin. It's been so long since I've made a video, and I don't even know. One of the reasons I have not made one sooner is because I just simply didn't know how to start, where to go. First of all, I will say that I have found Jesus. Alright. And that is something that I thought would not happen in a million years. I became so bitter to Christianity, so disillusioned to the whole idea of God and Christianity, that on one hand it was rediscovering a belief in a higher power that allowed me to detransition, but at the same time I was so I don't know how to word it. I would literally scoff at those who believed in Jesus and the Bible. I thought that the Bible was a collection of writings written by the Roman Empire or something to control us as human beings, to make us docile, I thought that Jesus was something that was taught, and this idea perpetuated to keep us humans minimal, docile, controllable, because if we would continue to believe that there was this being that was over us, then we would remain in fear. And I thought that I knew better than that. I did a lot of psychedelics and was in the New Age world for a long time, my wife and I both, and we thought we knew better. We thought that we knew a higher way, that we were working on ascending beyond this lowly earth life, and that there was bigger and greater things once you had achieved enough knowledge. And so we went on a mission to learn all we could. We would watch the ancient civilizations, ancient aliens kinds of shows and everything, and Dr. Joe Dispenza was huge to us. We went to a Dr. Joe Dispenza retreat, and we would spend all this time meditating, convincing ourselves that we were somehow advancing to a higher state than was available on this lowly earth life. And this continued even after I detransitioned, even after on one hand, the New Age world and psychedelics and meditation and everything allows you to become one with your fellow man, but when you spend so much time trying to become one with humanity, you forget to love your neighbor. I became so entrenched in this idea that I'm one with all of creation and all of existence, and one with consciousness, and that I was aware of consciousness, and that it was the same consciousness that Jesus Christ was a part of, and that I also have access to that and am the same as Jesus was, basically. And my belief was that Jesus was just exaggerated, an exaggerated man that had access to Christ consciousness just like any of the rest of us could if we put ourselves in a place to have access to that. And I greatly minimized Jesus and scoffed at those who believed in him. And I have had to go through a tremendous level of repentance. To repent of my ways for being so negative towards Jesus and the Bible, and for the ways that I would scoff at those who believed. Every time I saw a cross, I thought it was ridiculous that people had crosses up, and I would laugh at it. I'd drive by a cross on the side of the road and I'd be like, ha, that's crazy. Those people threw up this symbol of oppression. I literally thought that the Christians were oppressed beings, that they were in a little box of their own creation, and that I was outside of the box, that I had achieved this higher knowing and understanding of consciousness and awareness of a higher way of being, and that people who were Christian were just choosing to not be aware of that and choosing to just live in this tiny little box, and were so unaware of reality, the reality of life, and that they limited themselves in their lifestyle, that the reason Christians lived such limited lifestyles the way they did and didn't sin or whatever, that was just because they were so oppressed, so self-oppressed. Like they had the choice to get out of that little box if they wanted to, but they choose to be there. I really thought this. And it is the most wild thing for those of you watching this who are in this perspective, who think that Christianity is a smaller, limited way of being. Yes, there are those Christians that are that way. There are those Christians that are just closed-minded and judgmental and of limited perspective, right? Just like there are people of all kinds. In all walks of life, there are those who will take things a negative route. And that is true with Christians as well. But I had my mind blown. I arrived at a place where I realized that actually I was the one in the little box. To spend your entire existence trying so hard to ascend beyond this earth life and to be convinced that there is something greater out there beyond this earth life to achieve, that is small-minded. That is limited. I never would have believed anybody that tried to tell me that when I was in that place. I had to come to this conclusion and this realization on my own. It was through a tremendous level of self-discovery. I wanted to understand what it meant, why I was trans, why I had this experience that made me believe that I was born in the wrong body and made me go through a transition and surgery and female hormones and live as a woman for 6 years. I wanted to understand that because there, of course, was the part of me that wanted to believe I was just born that way, like the trans ideology was trying to tell me. And like my therapist that I went to told me. My therapist confirmed that, yes, you were likely just born this way, born in the wrong body. And I have all these people in the trans world trying to tell me that that's the reality, and I honestly believed that for the longest time. And so obviously if you believe that, like, oh, okay, then the only the only option, the only way to be happy is to change yourself to live that lifestyle, to change your body to match the way your mind is, because otherwise you're just going to be miserable the rest of your life. I honestly believe that if I did not transition and live as a woman, that I was going to eventually off myself, because I was going to be so miserable, so unhappy to not get to be the woman that I thought I was supposed to be. And so I did a tremendous amount of self-discovery and researching psychology and identity. And when I learned what forms a person's identity and sense of self, and read The Body Keeps the Score, and did Dr. Richard Schwartz's parts work, internal family systems training, it all unraveled for me. It just fell apart. I realized that what forms a person's identity is not just innately who they are. You're not just born who you think you are. Your sense of self and sense of identity is formed through experience. And as soon as I understood that, my whole world fell apart. I had been living as a woman for 6 years, and all of a sudden I had to question everything and question why a person is even attracted to the people they are. Why does a person think their sexuality is a certain way? They weren't born that way, and everything just unraveled and fell apart. And it felt like one of those moments that they portray so well in movies with the I don't know what they call that effect, where the camera zooms in on the person, but the background zooms out at the same time to establish the feeling of what is going on, what is happening. That's how I felt. I felt my whole identity falling apart when I realized that my identity was formed, that it wasn't just something I was born with. And so I'm living in a world that doesn't even accept a man dressed as a woman as it was, and I realized I cannot continue. There is no way I can keep going out into the world dressed as a woman, even though I had the surgery and even though I'd been living that way for 6 years. It all did not make any sense anymore to continue. And so along with learning about my identity, I also became aware. It was when I was looking at a flower. Have you ever really carefully analyzed a flower and really allowed yourself to sit there and think, why is that flower designed the way it is? And furthermore, why can 10,000 flowers form almost exactly the same shape? Each of them, of course, unique, with little tiny differences like a fingerprint, yet they all are patterned the same way. And it was that word, patterned, when I realized there was a pattern that caused these flowers to grow the way they did. So unique, so intricately designed. And I said to myself, okay, now I always convinced myself that something like that happened over millennia, over millions and millions of years of evolution, and organisms came together. In fact, I wrote a channeled book. All right, I'll talk more about that too later. Channeling consciousness outside of yourself. I wrote an entire book that was entirely channeled, which was supposedly channeled from some higher knowing outside of myself. I felt like it was channeled from consciousness, direct consciousness. And I wrote this book talking about in great detail, which I felt was coming to me from consciousness, great detail about how life came to be, how organisms formed into intelligence, and greater intelligence, and higher, more intricate patterns evolved over time until eventually we arrived as humans with the intelligence we have and everything. I honestly believe this to be the case. Like flowers, I believe that flowers were just the product of evolution, happening over so many years that it developed that design, and then that design repeated itself because it was in the DNA of the flowers or whatever. But I had a moment where I realized, wait a minute, and this was around the time that I was analyzing my own identity and deconstructing my gender identity as a woman. And I looked at that flower and I said, okay, that doesn't make sense to me anymore. I'm convinced that that flower is actually designed by a pattern that comes from a higher intelligence that is outside of this world. Some things came to me or formulated in my mind in just the right way that I couldn't accept any longer that a flower was just a chance thing over millennia. I came to this understanding that is absolutely the design of a higher power and a higher intelligence. I still couldn't accept God. I still couldn't call it God. I was like, no, that there's a higher intelligence, higher power, but God, no. Jesus still just a man to me. And I maintained that for a long time, and then I detransitioned, or largely because I had the same realization about male and female. That if that flower was a part of an intricate pattern, the design of intelligence outside of this life, then what about male and female? And that was when I realized I was created male by the same pattern of a higher intelligence. And like I said, I still didn't accept it as God, but I definitely realized that male and female were created after this pattern of a higher intelligence. And therefore, that was when I could no longer deny it. Together with my realizing that my identity was formed in experience, and that was what caused me to deny this pattern. It was my identity, my formed sense of self over my lifetime through experience that caused me to defy this pattern. And once I realized that and was able to allow myself to accept this pattern, and that I was created male based on this pattern of a higher intelligence, then I can't be a woman anymore. I can't live this lie anymore. And so I detransitioned, went back to living as a man, and my wife and stepdaughter and I moved to a different place, and life was going on. I was still working. I stopped making my videos because I came to this awareness that there was a higher intelligence out there controlling everything, and that's what male and female were. And then I didn't know how to make videos anymore. I kid you not. I got to a place where I was like, oh no. This whole time I've been making videos based on this idea that there is no God, and I had this recognition, this realization that the majority of the people I wanted my videos to speak to were trans people. I wanted so bad for other trans people to watch my videos and hear my logic and reasoning for why they shouldn't be trans, basically. Not that I was trying to, as some like to say, eradicate the world of trans people. No. I wanted trans people to be able to have the peace that I found in realizing that they didn't have to go down that path anymore, because it's not an easy path. It is not a fun path. It is not fun to have to make yourself live in a world that doesn't accept you and looks down on you and looks at you as though you're weird, and that's not fun. And so I am so happy and grateful that I came to the realization and was able to go back to life as a man comfortably, perfectly happily, and confidently, knowing that it was the right thing. And I wanted that for other trans people. That's why I was making my videos, to make other trans people aware that it is possible to be healed from this. You can heal from this. It is not a life sentence. But most trans people will not accept God. They will not accept any mention of Jesus, any mention of the Bible as a way to try to convince them that they shouldn't be living that lifestyle. They won't. The instant you say God or mention God as a part of your detransition, they count you off as a kook. They're like, well, so much for that. Not listening to that whack job anymore. And I didn't want to be seen that way. I wanted to continue to be heard by even the trans people that I was trying to speak to and trying to help recognize that they can heal this. And so I was like, how am I going to make videos now? I don't know how to make videos anymore because I don't know what to say. I no longer know what to say. Because if I start talking about God and mentioning or talking about how it was a realization that I was created by God and that's why I shouldn't be living as a woman anymore, the trans people are going to run. They're not going to listen to me anymore. And I didn't want that. And so I have been on a months and months long sabbatical of sorts. I've been just living my life and working my job and trying to figure out how in the world to reword my videos. How am I going to do it? And in the meantime, I went from just believing in a higher power to actually learning of Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. Okay? And like I said, some of you might think, what are you talking about? That's just crazy. And I would have told you the same thing. I used to think these people are nuts. These people are kooks that believe that Jesus was actually God? Like, what is this nonsense? But I want to tell you the story. I want to tell you the story of how I came to this understanding. Okay, so in this house that my wife and I moved to, first of all, the reason we live in this house, it's a great house and we love it. And it's wonderful. It's in a wonderful place where we're not right in the middle of downtown. If you remember some of my other videos I recorded in our backyard, and there was constant highway traffic and motorcycles racing by and all this noise happening all the time. And we found this place that I'm right out in my front yard right now, and there's all these oak trees, and it's very beautiful and very quiet, very private. And our back porch is very private and everything. But there's a story of how we came here, and that it was not led by God, for one. So I have struggled with an addiction to weed. You know, I grew up in the LDS church, most commonly known as Mormon church. I've talked a lot about that before. And as members of the church, we didn't so much as drink caffeine. Even caffeinated soda was off limits for us. So you can imagine things like alcohol, tobacco, marijuana was all very off limits. And so when I left the church and realized that was just a bunch of oppressive nonsense, right? And I discovered weed, I learned that it was extremely helpful at calming in me the anxieties, the self-hatred, the shame. It was really, really powerful at crushing my shame. I have a tremendously strong level of shame. This crushing, paralyzing shame that comes over me sometimes that makes me feel like I am a total failure. I can't do anything right. and I might as well not live anymore, right? And so like when me and my wife would get in an argument about something, and I would just start feeling like I'm nothing, I'm worthless. If I had failed something in my job, did something wrong in my job, this crushing shame would just come over me, and I would become paralyzed, and there was only a few ways that I could make myself feel better, and one of those was to go do something active, work on a car, just take my mind completely off of what it was on. And I used to have to do this a lot with my trans identity growing up as a man, feeling like I was in the wrong body. Every time those feelings would come over me, and I'd feel like I'm supposed to be a woman, I should be in a girl's body right now. That was when I would have to go make myself be just busy as can be on anything. I would work all day long. I wouldn't stop to eat. I would rebuild an entire truck all day long. Is my current truck behind me right now? Because that's another change in my life. I discovered that weed would immediately take that crushing shame away from me. And that's exactly how addiction works. When you discover that there is something outside of yourself that can so effectively take your pain away and make you feel better, the instant I would smoke weed, I'd take a few hits of that, and next thing I know, I'm perfectly happy and content. Perfectly happy to be here. I don't want to die anymore. It's all's good. All's well. Let's go on with life now. And so you can guess what happened. I got to where I would get up in the morning and start smoking from the instant I woke up, and wouldn't stop all day long. And then throughout the night, if I woke up in the middle of the night with anxiety or thoughts or anything and I couldn't sleep, then I'd get up and go smoke some more, and then go back to bed and sleep, and then next day started all over again. And one thing I learned about weed is that when you smoke weed, sometimes it can make you think that you have all these grand ideas, all these great ideas. I had a whole list of all these great ideas that I wrote down while I was high on weed that felt like they were like real millionaire ideas. These are ideas that are gonna really take off. These are ideas that are so good. I'm gonna get my family financially well off with these ideas. And one of those ideas, and it's not too far-fetched. See, I love diesel engines and I love restoring cars. And one of the ideas I came up with on the weed was to restore old Jeeps and put diesel engines in them. And I did one, and I still haven't sold it yet. I spent about 400 hours of my time restoring this Jeep and putting a diesel engine in it, with the anticipation that I was going to be able to sell it for a profit. And then I was going to repeat that process and keep building these Jeeps, these diesel Jeeps. And it was also AI, our ChatGPT, that along with the weed and AI, I had come up with this whole business plan, and it was going to be amazing. It was going to make all kinds of money. Rewind again back to when I was smoking the weed, and I came up with this whole idea, and I knew that I couldn't do it at the place we were living. There was just I had no garage, there was no yard, there was no place for me to do this, to work on these cars at all. And so we moved to this house, this bigger, much more expensive house, mind you. But when that weed and AI-induced, poorly executed business plan failed, all of a sudden we then found ourselves living in a house that was a lot more difficult to afford than we were planning on. And so then this caused a tremendous level of stress and more Like more sleepless nights, I of course was smoking weed just as heavy as ever to deal with those feelings, to make myself feel better living in this house and trying to figure out how I'm gonna afford to pay for it when I cannot even get this first Jeep that I built to sell. Can't even get any interest in it. Once in a while someone would send me a message, but no one has come to look at it in person, and that is so rare. That is not like my past experiences selling vehicles. So it's clear to me that God had some hand in this to teach me a lesson or something, right? And it has been my experience in the past that any time God was trying to get my attention, it's not that God puts us in hardship, but He allows hardship to happen in order to bring us back to Him. And this is what I honestly believe now. I honestly believe that I was allowed to go through hardship so that I would humble myself. Because you cannot be susceptible to God. You cannot recognize His promptings and His inspiration when you are in a prideful, I know better than God state. And this is where most people in the New Age world are just constantly. I know better. I'm of higher intelligence. Most people in the New Age world who do psychedelics and things eventually arrive at a place where I am God. There's nothing higher than me. And I got there. I was in a place where I honestly believed that I had access to the same level of consciousness that any other intelligence had, and therefore I basically was God, basically the same as God. We're all God. You're God, I'm God, she's God, he's God. That's where I was, right? And so I had this whole business idea, rented this house with the idea that it was all gonna work out great, and then it all fell apart and nothing was working out. And I had to be humbled. So I continued to meditate and things, to try to meditate on it, keep smoking weed, trying to figure this out, kept doing mushrooms here and there to try to figure it out, try to figure out how to make this work, because I was still convinced that that was the answer. Those were the things that you do to gain higher awareness, because that was my experience in the past with weed and with mushrooms, psychedelics, that they allowed me access to this higher awareness and higher knowing. And it was when I was in that state that I was able to figure out complex problems and things. It's a counterfeit God that you're experiencing in those places, though. Absolutely counterfeit. And that's how the adversary works. Satan, the adversary, wants to convince you that things are what they're not. Wants to convince you you're accessing God. This is God. Or partake of this fruit, you shall become as the gods, knowing all. That is what mushrooms are. It's like the fruit that Adam and Eve were tempted with and ultimately took, because who doesn't want to become as the gods? Who doesn't want to know all there is to know? And mushrooms, and especially mushrooms and weed together when used at the right time, gives you this incredible feeling that you know all. You have access to everything. I believed that I was accessing what they call the Akashic records, which is basically consciousness and the record of everything, how everything was created. I thought I had access to that. It was such an incredible feeling to have at the time, but now, being on the other side of it, knowing how counterfeit it was, knowing that it was not of God, It was a counterfeit God to deceive me, to bring me down. And so answers still weren't coming. I still wasn't figuring out this whole thing, this whole financial thing. Wasn't figuring anything out. Nothing was working. Everything felt unsafe. And I finally reached a place, a bottom, where I was brought to my knees. Absolutely brought to my knees. And I prayed for the first time, okay, Jesus, show me your love for me. Show me your love for me, because I feel nothing. I don't feel anything. I'm lost here. Jesus, please show me your love for me. And in that moment, I had finally allowed myself to be open to it. I had finally humbled myself enough to call out for help to the actual God, not to these counterfeit gods, not to the weed gods, not to the mushroom gods, not to the yoga gods, not to any other God, but the God, which is Jesus. Jesus is God in the flesh. And that was a concept that was really hard for me to accept too, because growing up in the LDS church, you're taught that God is one being and then Jesus is a separate being from God. In the Mormon church, they do not believe in the Trinity. And so for people to try to tell me that Jesus was God, having descended to the earth and become Jesus, and was God in the flesh, living as Jesus on the earth, I was like, it didn't compute to me. It didn't make any sense. I was like, this isn't, that can't be. That I know that God and Jesus are two separate beings. But that's because I grew up my whole life being taught that and shown pictures that depicted that. God with Jesus on his right hand standing over Joseph Smith. And so anyway, I humbled myself and I prayed to God. I prayed to Jesus. I specifically said, Jesus, show me your love for me. Show me your love for me. And in that time of desperation, desperate needing answers, desperate wanting to know who I am, why I am, what is this, what should I do here, why did this business plan fail, why is this happening to me and my family, what's going on here? Jesus, show me your love for me. And all of a sudden I felt his presence. I'm not kidding. Like if you've never experienced this, and I heard people my whole life talk about feeling the presence of Jesus, and you're full of, that's nonsense. What are you talking about? You're crazy. You're crazy. You must be on something. But when it happens, it felt so undeniable, so undeniably real that he was there with me. And I closed my eyes and I could picture not necessarily the being of Jesus, because he was visiting me in spirit, not in physical form. But I felt like his arms wrap around me, this incredible, warm, comforting embrace. And then he had some things to show me. I had to understand who he was and understand his love for me. And what I was shown was my entire life and all the times that I thought I was alone, it's kind of like the Footprints in the Sand poem, if you've ever heard that one, where this guy's shown an image of footprints on the beach, and along the way the footprints line up with different times in his life, and sometimes there's two sets of footprints, and that was representative of when Jesus was walking beside him. But he noticed that there was one set of footprints sometimes, and those one set of footprints happened to align with some of the worst times of my life. And then he says to Jesus, why did you leave me at those times? Why is there only one set of footprints? You just left me alone. And Jesus says, actually, I was carrying you during those times. That's why there was only one set of footprints, because they're mine and I was carrying you. And I was shown a very similar experience. I was shown my whole life, my transition, my living as a woman, and how I was allowed to go down that path because we have free will as human beings. We have a choice that we can make. We can make choices. They're not always the best in our lives, but we always grow. We learn and grow from these choices. Perhaps if I had not gone down that path, I might not have grown in the ways that I did. Maybe I never would have truly found Jesus. Maybe I would have continued in my life of not knowing Jesus, not knowing true God. I would have maintained an ego that kept me separate from it. I don't know. I really don't know. But Jesus showed me that he was there with me all along, just like a loving parent. I was shown the example of, like, when you're watching your young child, and I literally visualized this. It was like Jesus allowed me to visualize this concept of being a parent and standing there watching your child make a mistake or spill something on the floor, and you still have this unconditional love for them, and you don't withdraw your love from them just because they made a mess. That would be ridiculous, although some parents make that mistake. They treat their kid as if they're less lovable because they make a mistake, but that's earthly parents. That's not God. God doesn't act that way. God does not work that way. Jesus does not work that way. Jesus maintains this unconditional love for you no matter what mistakes you make. He's not necessarily happy that you're making those mistakes, but he still loves you, and he's still there, and he's still there to carry you through the hard times. And that was what I was shown, was that even though I thought I was alone, and I thought that he had left me and was no longer there with me, that, oh yes, he was, and he always loved me unconditionally, no matter what. And by seeing that, by being shown this in vision form, in the presence of the Spirit of Jesus himself, I couldn't deny it. I recognized that, it allowed me to dissolve a lot of this self-hatred that I've lived with for so long, this belief that I'm flawed as a human, as a person, that I'm a flawed individual that makes all these mistakes. And in that moment, I was able to understand what Jesus actually is, and I was able to accept that Jesus is. Like, prior to that, like, I can't remember how long before it was that my wife had a similar experience. She was the same way. Would scoff at those who believed in Jesus. She grew up like I did, in a household of believers that Jesus was real, God was real, but she too, like me, had arrived at this place after doing yoga for so many years and yoking herself to other gods and smoking weed and things, that we both just got to this place where we could not accept Jesus as real. And so she had a moment where she prayed earnestly to God and had a visit from Jesus. And I still hadn't yet. And I was like, okay, what is this? How's this going to work out? How are we going to maintain a relationship where you believe in Jesus, but I still don't? I still have not had this experience. I can't get on board with this. But that's cool for you. Cool for you. You have your Jesus experience and everything, but I'm over here just like, this is just weird. This is weird. I don't think I can accept this. And so I was very glad to have my own experience, because now we're both in a union, in marriage, where we both have this knowing. We both know Jesus, and we've connected with a very wonderful church community that is incredible and has been so good to us and so welcoming to us. And we found out that this church community that we became part of was also praying for us for years. They would see me come into the coffee shop, local coffee shop, and work when I was in my trans woman identity self. And I'd go there and I'd work all day long at the coffee shop on my computer. And they'd see me and they'd be friendly and kind to me. But behind the scenes, they were praying earnestly for me, praying for me and my wife. And we had no idea at the time. My memory card got full, so I had to go find another memory card. So what I wanted to talk about, though, about that is, like I said, I used to always see those who believed in Jesus as so limited. You guys are so limited. You're in this tiny little box that you created for yourself. What is with that? Like, I just thought it was so limited. But in this experience, Jesus also showed me that our human psyche can create a box of our own making. Ultimately, what I realized was that I was the one in the box, right? I was convinced that the Christians, those who believed in Jesus, were the ones in a tiny little box, because I saw them as very limited and unaware of things that were greater than them. But when I had this experience and I realized, it was I had this realization that I found myself sitting in a little box and realizing, oh crap, they're the ones that are out of the box. And like I said earlier, there are those Christian people, those believers that are indeed just judgmental and of small thinking, but that's not generally what Christians are. That's not generally what it means to believe in Jesus. I had this realization that I was spending so much of my life and so much energy trying to ascend beyond this limited earth life, that was the box I created for myself. The box I created for myself was this constant striving to achieve a higher knowing, to achieve a higher consciousness that was available to me, that was not available in Christianity or at church. That church was so limited and small. And once I realized that I was actually the one in the box, and that those in the New Age spiritual world are the ones in the box, and that the Christians are actually the ones who had it figured out. It's not that they had it figured out, it's that it was all laid out for them many, many years ago when God Himself came to earth in the form of Jesus. God in the flesh, as Jesus Christ Himself, He came here to teach us these things, to teach us exactly who we were supposed to be, how we were supposed to be, how we were supposed to live, what was good, what was bad, what was right, what was wrong. He came here and told us all of that. And it's those of us who chose to ignore that and to count that off as small and limited that are actually the ones that are small and limited. When I was a teenager, I learned this concept that I had obviously since forgotten, that sometimes a path is laid out not to limit you. When you are told to walk this path, it is not to limit you from going other places that would be more beneficial to you, but it's for your own protection. It's to save you, to protect you from harming yourself, to protect you from experiencing hardship. When we choose to follow Jesus' plan for us, which was very clearly laid out, and we have this wonderful book called the Bible that lays it all out. If you just look at the Bible now and then, as it just appears to be just this book of nonsense. That's what I thought. I allowed myself to think that's what it was. Just a book of nonsense written by these people, these delusional people. But if you actually take the time to study it and actually take the time to read through it, you will find that the things contained in the Bible are actually very beneficial to your happiness and well-being. That if you adhere to those things, if you do the things that it says, if you do the things the Bible says and live the ways that it tells you to live, the ways that Jesus taught us to live, the ways that the prophets through or with God's message through the prophets taught us how we should be and live, that's where the happiness is. That's where the contentment is. Not in this constant striving for, oh, I've got to understand how I can live happier, how I can be a better person by meditating all the time. I had meditations online that I taught people how to meditate. And with the crazy thing with meditation is you're taught to shut off all your thoughts, but what you're doing is opening yourself up to demons, basically. Meditation is closing God off and opening yourself up to other gods, to things outside of yourself. Meditation is not actually good. It's good to learn how to not let your mind run away with yourself, but the basis behind meditation is not a good thing. You should not practice meditation. You should practice prayer. Prayer is where you should spend your time. Praying to the God that created you. Praying to Jesus, your Savior. That is who you should be praying to. That is who you should be devoting your time to. And I used to think that was ridiculous, that was limited, that was small-minded, and that there was such a better, higher way of being. And then I had that all brought down. I had it all brought down to an awareness that actually I was the one limited in the small box and the Christians are the ones that had it figured out. And when I started reading the Bible again and realizing, oh wait, these are actually really, really good messages, really good teachings, there's the scripture that says, by their fruits you shall know them. And I've learned the fruit that comes from reading the scriptures, from reading the Bible, the fruit that comes from trusting the one and only God, not putting my faith in other gods, but in the one and only high God, Jesus Christ, God, that the fruit of that is abundant, it is amazing, it's beautiful, it fills you with such joy, safety, and comfort beyond anything else. No other substance, no weed. I have not smoked weed for months and months now. Okay, I have not taken any psychedelics. I have not participated in any yoga classes. I have not meditated. I have done none of that stuff that is associated with other gods. I have devoted my life and my energy to the one and only high God. Because to do anything else is just, it's limited. The high God has all. He knows all. He loves us unconditionally. He's not always happy when we make certain choices, but he's like a loving parent that will never withdraw his love for us, no matter how much, no matter what mistakes we make. No matter what mistakes you make, God is not going to withdraw his love from you. He is not an angry, vengeful God like some people like to teach. That is just not the reality. And so, I'm cold from standing out here in the rain all this time, and I think I've effectively said what I wanted to say in this video that I've put off making for a long time because I just didn't know how to make it. I didn't know what I was going to say. I prayed before making this video, please God, help me to know what I should say. Give me the words that I should say in this video, because I want it to be right. I want to say the right things, and I think I've effectively said it. And so that is my story of going from from a trans woman living life as a woman to realizing that there is some higher power, and falling into New Age spirituality for many years, and then coming to Jesus. So, Mormon to trans to New Age to Jesus. I appreciate you all for watching, and I love you all. Please consider following Jesus yourself. For the fruits are amazing. The fruits that come from it. There is nothing better. It's beautiful. Love you all. Take care.